Did you just throw your phone?
No, I did not throw the phone.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Beg Pardon. As always, I'm your host Anthony, joined by Carlos, and welcome to the show. How's it going, Carlos?
That was such an abrupt opening. That's why.
You like that? You like that? I don't know why I said that. Oh, hell.
It's going all right.
Yeah. See,
Lot more
guys,
laughs
we would
now.
redo that for you, but nah.
Why? It's gold.
Right, you get what you get.
Get what you pay for.
What?
I said you get what you pay for.
Right, yeah. You know how many times I've been told that? A lot in my life.
If I had a nickel for every time, I'd be able to actually pay for the crap that I want.
Right. E and I saw an apartment a couple years ago, and it was really expensive for the neighborhood. It was like $2,400 for like a one bedroom.
Jeez.
And he showed it to us, and I was like, well, to be honest, I mean, it's a little bit higher than what we wanted to pay. And it, like dead ass, like straight faceless looking. He was like, well, you get what you pay for. I was like, oh shit. I felt so uncomfortable. I was like, man, these leasing agents are real bold. Like, real bold.
He was like, you wasted my time, made me come here, so this is what you get.
Right. Sir, you work here. We came to you. You didn't even have to leave. But yeah, it was intense. But you know what? I don't know if it was just that demeanor. Maybe I need that. Because I was like, hell, like, we should get it. Like, we get what we pay for. Like, a little fiery attitude, nice little apartment.
You're like, and long story short, we've been here 2 years.
Right, and long story short, welcome to our home. But yeah, it was a little intense. I was like moderately afraid. I was like, because you don't see people getting that aggressive.
Well, because they're professional, usually.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe that was his version of professional. I don't know. So this week we are talking about fears, what we are afraid of. Clearly, I was afraid of that gentleman, but we're talking about what scares us, and I mean, we can open it up. We can talk about like what legitimately scares us, or like fear, like internal fears. So I didn't know how you took this week's assignment. I don't know how you took it, or if you took it literally, or if you took it like metaphorically.
That's a good question. I took it as like, did you mean like personal fear? Did you mean like professional fear? Did you mean like I'm afraid of spiders? Or
all of them?
Okay. Because I was like, well, I have answers in case. Like, I have stacks on stacks on stacks for answers. So, yeah. What do you want me to start with?
What are you most afraid of?
Ooh. What am I most afraid of?
In life. Like
That's
your whole
a tie.
life. Okay.
I have abandonment issues. So, I'm always afraid. No matter how long somebody's been my friend, no matter how long I've known someone, I'm always afraid, like, they're gonna up and leave one day. That's from childhood, though. But yeah, that's my crippling one. It's very exhausting, as you know, to be my friend, because it's constant like reassurance of like, no, we're good, we're friends. Like,
we're
so
still here.
exhausting.
This episode was a terrible idea.
That's probably one, and the other one that I'm tied with is I'm always afraid that something that we say here in jest and everything becomes something that someone takes out of context or someone uses as a whole like damning thing for a career, because we say things on here that sometimes are dark, sometimes aren't, but it's always in jest. It's never like sick real opinions where we're like they should have shot him. Like, we've never said anything like that.
I was like, why are you saying no?
Yeah, we've never done anything like that. But I'm always afraid that somebody's going to, because there are people out there who just listen to things, watch things just to be offended because they love that power. I mean, we did a whole episode on cancel culture where they love that power of, I just ended everything for you. How'd that feel? Do you like that? Like, I feel like I'm always afraid that that shoe's going to drop for us because, again, we say things that we find funny for each other. If you all laugh with us, beautiful. That's the goal. But if not, 9 times out of 10, the joke was for the other person anyway. And that's the story behind the curtain there. But I think people, like, you forget that life itself is funny. It's sarcastic, it's ironic, it's dark, it's whimsical, it's silly, but it's all funny. And people stop seeing the humor in it and just see it as dark or just see it as bad irony. And I think that kind of is what makes me most afraid, is something that was supposed to be in jest to lighten the mood became now the executioner for everything that I've worked for or am working for. I think those are my 2 biggest ones.
Ironically, I'm not afraid of that. And you would think I would be. I out of the 2 of us, I want the more like public life. I'm afraid of failure. Probably the most. No, second most. Second most, I'm afraid of failure. Whether it's failing relationships, failing myself, failing my family, failing my friends. I'm just constantly, I have this crippling anxiety that I'm not good enough. Like, it's just never gonna, no matter what happens. Yeah. We were literally just talking about that before we started the show.
Before that cold
where I was like, it's never enough. Yeah, it's never enough. So that's probably my second one. And my first one is like me. I'm like afraid of me. Like, I'm afraid that like one day, I mean, you just hear these like, I truly believe that the line between like functioning member of society and like monster are like razor thin. I feel like it's like razor thin. And I mean, yes, you see theatrical versions of it and like Joker or other movies like that, but like I feel like that's very real. So, you know, I look at people in real life who people are like, oh my God, like look at them. Or like, all like, kidding aside, like people like I mean we mentioned it, I think in like a previous episode in a jestful way, but you still end up mentioning it. But like Britney Spears, like with your whenever we were talking about like you shaving your head, reveal. yeah, and like that line between like neat and messy is just super close. And I'm like always worried that I'm just gonna like one day it's just gonna be like, and I'm gone. Like I don't know how to describe it. But yeah, that's probably like my number one fear. The only time I'm not afraid of that is whenever I'm sleeping, and even then, I mean, hell, we should have an episode about nightmares.
We might do that one next.
Right, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you know, so what do you do? What do you do to combat your fears?
That's a really good question.
You're like, I'm just always afraid. I don't.
I was gonna say I don't know if I've combated them, to be honest.
Or tried. Well, maybe not combating them, but living with them. Like, how do you do you acknowledge them? Do you just try to avoid triggering situations? Do you
No, I acknowledge them. Because I think you have to acknowledge it. You know?
Yeah. No.
It's one of those things that, you know, you have to give it a name type thing. Yeah. Because if you don't, then it just becomes fear of the unknown, kind of plays into it. Mm-hmm. I think being open about it helps, because as long as people know your intentions, you know, you get past that hurdle. So, for instance, making our intentions clear about this podcast or what we say and things, you know, even if something of ours gets taken out of context, we already addressed that it wasn't meant that way, you know?
Right.
Or
Were you
even,
always afraid? Sorry to interrupt you. Were you always afraid, though, of, like, was it at a certain level? Was it whenever we started putting content on video? Was it after you found out that, like, literally thousands of, on our audio versions, like, thousands of people listen?
Yeah.
Like, what was it? Was there a time, or were you always afraid of it?
I think in some small ways I was always afraid of that. Once cancer culture became a thing, I think I was always afraid of that. Even before we started a show.
Right, I was about to say, because that was before the show even started. We
Yeah,
maybe
it's
had been
just-
talking about starting a show, but
It wasn't. We didn't do it yet, and it was
Yeah.
just something like, oh my gosh, did one of my tweets get taken out of context, or did one of my Facebook posts, or a video that I shared that I thought was funny, is that going to get taken out of context? You know, that's when that fear like started up, and then when we started doing this, I was like, ugh, people might quickly remind me I'm not that funny, like, but I kind of just, you know, you have to live with it. It's, if I wrote a check and that cashed,
you
I gotta
love
live with
saying
it.
this.
But as far as the other one goes, I just took it as, you know, you meet people for whatever reason. Sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. It had nothing to do with you. It wasn't a reflection of you. It was just, that wasn't meant to be a longer chapter. And that's okay. You know? Not everything is meant to be a full novel. But the people who do stay for the full novel are few and far between when you really look at it. I mean, how many people can really say in their life they have more than 4 friends who stay lifetime? You know?
Yeah.
So I think it just makes you appreciate the ones that you kind of realize are lifers. And it makes it a deeper bond and a deeper relationship between it. And I think in kind of going against that fear and kind of like countering it and acknowledging it, I think you kind of learn that. And you have to be afraid to lose something to know you genuinely care about it. So I think that in and of itself is proof that, you know, I'm capable of actually caring about things. Because to many people who don't know me, I could be pretty cold. Like, I can stop talking to someone and not think twice about it if I wasn't that tight with you. So I think for me, it's kind of the realization of, if I'm afraid that this is going to happen, that must mean that this is genuinely something that I don't want to happen. And it's just a vicious cycle of, how do I prevent it from happening and all that crap. But I think the more you kind of talk through it with yourself, or even, you know, a friend or a spouse or something, the more you can kind of dissect your fear, so that you can understand. You'll always be afraid of it. That's inevitable. But you can at least understand why you're afraid of it. Like, we've talked about it numerous times, where you said, you know, you're afraid of yourself. And I've told you numerous times, I'm terrified of myself. But I think the more I reflected on it and the more I understood myself and all versions of myself, I think it was something that I wasn't afraid of it as much anymore. I was just afraid of what happens if X scenario happens. But I wasn't afraid of me anymore. And I think that's just something that everyone really has to do. Is just, it's not saying you're going to overcome that fear, or it's not like you're afraid of heights and you can all of a sudden like teeter on the height and you're like, oh, I'm not afraid anymore. Or you're afraid of spiders and someone's like, just hold this tarantula. Like, it's nothing like that. And sometimes those fears are even crippling too, actually. But I think the more you understand it, the more logical you can be about a fear.
Yeah, and you know, similar. I mean, with my fear of like failure, so like I learned that for those of people that know me, I mean, I'm deeply transparent, almost to a fault sometimes. Like it's just like word vomit, like whatever I'm thinking, whatever I'm like, no matter what things in my life, and I try not to divulge like goals or plans unless it's with like a core group of people, like my chosen family, because if I do that, then I end up, even if these other people don't set expectations, I set my expectations on what I think that they want. Mm-hmm. And if there's never that connection, I don't have to worry about it. And then I just do what I want to do, how I want to do it to the best of my ability. And then usually they're satisfied with the outcome because they weren't expecting anything at all. Mm-hmm. So I try to kind of march that line a little bit. Whenever it comes to like me being afraid of myself, therapy helps. I think that I'm not currently in therapy. I would like to be. I haven't found a therapist yet down here, but I think that it's nice to have somebody who's not like individually invested in your life, because then you don't feel like judged. You don't feel I don't know. You don't feel like you have to pretend to be somebody, because I don't have to feel like I'm going to let this person down. I don't care if I let down Susan or whatever her name is, whatever I named her. Like I'm not worried about letting her down. I don't know her, Out of this hour segment, I mean, she wants nothing to do with me. I want nothing to do with her. But yeah, and I think that it's all about too, like finding healthy like coping mechanisms, which I was very bad at until 5:10 p.m. October 8th, 2020. But no, I think that, I've chosen like really negative things to cope with in the past, like alcohol, food, partying, just self-destructive behaviors, because they seem to work the best, and they are also like enjoyable to do, like enjoyable just to do in general. Right. And I think that creates really big problems. And I think a lot of people, especially in our generation, are talking more. We have now like one of the most, I think, diverse, educated, and I don't mean in like a school sense, and self-aware generations ever.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we see so much change for the good in the world, because like we're just we're more in tune with ourselves, and we talk about these things. We talk about what scares us. We talk about our hopes. We talk about our dreams. We talk about our success. We talk about our failure. We talk about the importance of women being empowered, about men being vulnerable, about, I don't know, like there was like this weird structure of stereotypes, I think, in our parents' generation, in all generations prior to that relied so heavily on these like societal norms that I'm speaking from a male perspective, that left a lot of men, turning. I mean, alcoholism was really big. It's still big. Mm-hmm. Bunch of guys going out cheating on their wives. Like there was no room for vulnerability if you were a man.
Yeah.
And I think it still sticks around too a little bit.
Yeah, So I watched Action Park documentary, which we talked about Action Park in the amusement park episode. And at the end of the documentary, go ahead.
Was that on? Is there another one coming out on HBO Max called?
That's the one that's on there.
It's called Action Park?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's called Action Park.
I don't know why I thought it was called. Oh, maybe it's the something that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, probably. I can tell you after
something to do with like a lawsuit or something.
Yeah.
We'll flash it up on there for you guys.
Yeah, but
and it has that picture of that person like in the slide or whatever.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
And it was, first of all, side note, Action Park was insane. When you watch that, you're like,
was it good? I don't have HBO. I don't want to pay for that.
If you have AT&T, they give you HBO. So anybody who has AT&T, HBO Max.
I was about to say, I don't have HBO. I don't want to pay for that.
Yeah.
AT&T, oh, like for your phone or your internet?
Yeah, for either. If you're doing business with
Oh.
AT&T, they give you HBO because they own it now. But in there, the last thing that one of the guys said, he basically said, like, Action Park was a rite of passage for a lot of people. That was like where you proved that you were like a man, basically, to the teenagers and stuff. And he said, it's funny now when you look back and you talk about it, and it's something that you laugh about and you joke about with your buddies over some beers. Like, wasn't that crazy? He's like, but it's the same stuff that you talk about with your therapist, and it's not funny. And I think that was true for all of us in that generation, where we talk about it amongst each other. It's like, wasn't that so funny? Wasn't that so crazy? But it's the same things we talk about with our therapist. That we're like, no, that was awful. I'm trying to make it funny, but that was awful. And, I think that there was such a stigma around all of this because people were always like, well, a man shouldn't do that. A man shouldn't do this. Yeah, a man shouldn't beat his wife either. But a lot of older generations did.
Yeah.
A man shouldn't viciously beat his children. A man should come home after work, not go to the bar and stay there for 7 hours, put your whole paycheck on the bar, And I think that those type of things that we had, the quote-unquote role models that we had that were telling us to do those things, you really, when you grew up, you realize that I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And as the generations move forward, you realized, because again of the internet, a lot of people were like you, and they didn't want to do that. A lot of people did not want to live that lifestyle. And I think that that's when it kind of became more okay to say I'm not okay, especially if you were a man. Mm-hmm. And I think, with more awareness too for like military people with their PTSD, that's about as manly as you can get in our society, is going into the military. It really is. Right. And, with a lot of veterans saying, I'm not okay, and kind of being open about it too, I think that kind of opened the doors for everyone, every average Joe, to be like, yeah, I'm not okay either, by the way. I mean, I didn't see my buddy's head get blown off or something, but I lived through some stuff too. And I think once everyone kind of started telling each other, like, you don't have to go through the same thing I did to be affected the way you are, I think that kind of helped. Because a lot of people who are, depressed or going through some stuff, they always think like, well, I mean, they had it worse than I did. I have no right to be this way. My life wasn't that bad. But you don't know that. Like, it's
correct, yeah.
It affected you that way. What affects you and what affects me are two very different things, because we had to, whatever our environment was, our minds and our coping mechanisms shaped around those.
Yeah, we had to adapt to it.
Exactly. So, I could have a much stronger mentality and can take a lot more than some people, but that doesn't mean I don't have a breaking point. That doesn't mean that every day I'm not broken every day. I just hide it well. That's the secret. It's like when Avengers, when Hulk was like, that's my secret, I'm always angry. That's my secret, I'm always broken.
Right.
I just know how to hide it.
Yeah. I just know how to hold up the pieces and like walk
exactly.
around.
Yeah. And my wife laughs because I always talk about, if you guys watch that movie Watchmen, there's a scene where he's telling a joke and he says a man goes to the doctor and he says, doctor, I feel depressed, I feel awful, I don't know what to do anymore. And the doctor tells him, well, you should go see this clown in town. His name's Payachi. Go watch him, he'll make you laugh, it'll be a good time. And then the guy goes to the doctor and says, that's just it, doctor, I am Payachi. And it's kind of like, what do you do? If you are the person that everyone goes to laugh and feel better, who do you go to? Right. And I think we're getting to a point now where people are like, if you need help, get it. No one's going to make fun of you anymore for getting it. Correct. If anything, they'll point out when you don't get it. Like, dude, you need to get some help.
Yeah, it's getting real dark. That's
your 8th beer in an hour. Yeah.
But we want to hear from you guys. What are you afraid of? I think that putting names and faces and identities on things that we're afraid of is important, because then we're able to, cope with them, live with them, attack them. But as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Beg Pardon. We'll put some links down in the description box for resources for you as well, if you guys ever need somebody to talk to. But thank you guys so much for tuning in.
And just like always, if you like this video, go ahead and hit subscribe. You can get all of our latest videos, including our water cooler series, only on YouTube. Or if you prefer to listen to us, which a lot of you do, you can find us on Pandora, Google
Please
Play,
watch the show.
Podcasts. Yes, please also watch. If you want, play the audio, play the video, and then just mute the audio for the video and have it both going. Let's fudge some numbers here, kids. But again, audio, you can find us pretty much everywhere. Now that we're on Pandora, a lot of you like the Pandora option more.
Yeah, I was surprised at that.
Yeah, I noticed.
I was like, wow, we were missing out. We were missing out on a little demographic of
yeah,
listeners.
pretty big one.
But I didn't. Side note, I couldn't tell if that is people that are switching from other, because I didn't see like a big influx in numbers, but I saw an influx in the platform being used.
That's also
so I didn't. Yeah, so I think it's still the same people, or not necessarily the same people, but the same numbers, and just using that maybe instead of like the website link or whatever.
Yeah. So thank you for that. But that will do it for us on this week's Beg Pardon. As always, he's been Anthony. I've been Carlos. Remember, as a great president once said, the only thing to fear is fear itself. Until next time.